me see if this is working. Yeah. All right. So most people are not able to join us at night, which is fine. We have this option of having a Zoom class anyway. It's not a requirement, considering that this course is mainly an online course. Just considering the rapid nature of the class, and I think it's over 6 weeks, I felt somewhat obligated to do this because I wanted to make sure everybody was on the same page and had access to quality instruction outside of just the normal online format through Blackboard. I have old school feelings when it comes to having an English class in an online environment. I just don't think it works very well. You miss a lot of the interactivity. In fact, most of the learning that takes place in the liberal arts side is through the art of conversation and discourse and lecture. So that's why I wanted to really offer these Zoom sessions, not as a requirement, but as an option to supplement the instruction in the self-paced methodology of the online environment. So that's what we're going to do. And again, I apologize for not being here last week. Couldn't be helped, had to go out of town unexpectedly. And by the time I got back, I had all of this stuff going on, so I wasn't able to record anything that I planned to do, but that's okay. I'm going to take care of a lot of that tonight. I understand that I see that several people have already turned in their fiction essays, and I'm sure they're working on their poetry essays. And for those of you who have already done that, awesome. I mean, you guys are just killing it. This is mainly for everyone else who may be still trying to play catch up a little bit, and that's okay. We're gonna work through this and make the best that we can of it. Having said that, for those of you who have turned your stuff in, I'm going to talk a little bit about some research methods tonight, because I've had several people email me confused about what constitutes an academic source, where can I find academic sources, and then we're going to talk a little bit about the MLA format as well, because it seems that some people are ironically unaware of what the MLA format is and why it's used in this class. So I assumed that most people in a 102 class have already picked that up in 101. But hey, that's okay. We'll make the best of it. We'll do what we got to do. So I'm going to start off tonight with the research methods. I'll probably spend about 10-15 minutes on that, and then a quick little 5-minute tutorial on the MLA requirements. I'm not going to go into it in depth, but I will show you where you can find some information about the MLA format and why it's used. And then that way you can do a little more research on your own to make sure that what you're turning is MLA compliant. And then I'm going to offer some perspective on the fiction readings and poetry readings. Again, several people have already turned their fiction papers in. So here's an option. If you feel like you could have done better on it, or if you feel like you could have filled it out a little more with some of the content that I was talking about tonight, or going to talk about tonight, you have the option to resubmit it if you want. Not, it really depends on what grade you got, but that's totally up to you, however you want to work that. To be honest with you all, considering this is a 6-week class, I am not as strict with this online class as I am my normal day classes. I know that's probably not the right answer, but I'm overwhelmed right now with a full course load on top of working full time at Eglin. And I know you all are as well. That's the reason why you probably chose this type of format. So the requirements are the same, but I'm not going to be as strict, especially with the due dates and penalties. There's no way I can keep up with it. So my policy is, as long as you've completed the work before the last assignment is due, which I think is August 8th, do your best to get it in early. That way, it kind of takes some pressure off of me, please. You do, I'm not going to penalize you if you turn it in, like say 3 or 4 days late or anything like that. Let me check the chat here real quick. Somebody, can we also discuss some tips on how to write our poem for the third reading response? I'm stumped on where to start. Yeah, I'll talk about that as well. Absolutely. And try to give you a little bit of perspective there. So actually, let me go ahead and address that. So here's my thought for the poem. Of course, you're welcome to try one of the formats or the styles that we're discussing in poetry, either a sonnet style or an ode or a lyrical ballad, something that has some kind of a rhyme scheme and a particular meter to it. However, most poetry that's written today is in what we call a free verse beat kind of style. I'm not exactly sure what the term for it is. It's a different kind of feel. So if you're having issues with the poetic style, just understand that you don't necessarily have to put it to a particular meter or rhyme scheme. That is called a free verse poem. And basically a free verse poem, the way it looks on the page, is kind of that block style that you see in a normal poem, but there are a bunch of random thoughts, random emotions that are kind of stitched together, almost like a quilt. If you remember the back in the old days, the old ladies used to make the quilts, and they would take a little bit of this fabric, or maybe this old blue jean, or maybe this old tablecloth, or what, they just use what they had, and they just kind of put all that stuff together and just kind of fit well, right? It just kind of flowed. A free verse poem for the scope of this class can be very, very similar. You can select a topic and then just write down a bunch of random thoughts or feelings or perspectives or whatever you want, whatever you're writing about. They don't necessarily have to rhyme. They don't necessarily have to have a logic to it. There can be some abstract nature to that. And that works. That's fine. Again, this is not a poetic class. So I'm not expecting you to write a poem kind of like what William Shakespeare did, or even some of the other poets that we'll discuss. But I just wanted you to try your hand at it, and you get some points out of it. It's a neat little thing. Some people write poetry every day as a hobby. I'm surprised to see that that quite a few people actually still write poetry. In this high-tech age of, it seems like things of that nature a little antiquated for some people. But anyway, having said that, does that answer your question, Miss Dubose, about the some tips on how to? Okay, good deal. Like I said, I'm not high expectations or anything, so just try your hand at it and just see. A lot of times I throw little things out there just to give you something to try, something new that you may have never tried before, and you may find that you like it. So it's kind of cool. All right, so let me get started with the 15-minute. I'm going to try to keep it within 15 minutes. I'm not going to try to go too long tonight, but I'm going to try to try to stay on track here. So I'm looking at the clock, so about 15 minutes. All right, good deal. Should be about 5:25. So help me stay on track here. But I want to, let me share my screen real quick. And this one. All right, so we want to talk about some tips, tricks, however you want to call it. Let's see, I'm not sure if it's showing now. I think it is. There we go. Now we're cooking. How do I find research material, academic sources? What constitutes an academic source? What does not? Different disciplines have different requirements for what constitutes an academic source. The way I look at it is this, we live here in Florida. We're impacted by hurricanes a lot. If I want to know the latest information that dealing with a certain hurricane that may be 100 miles offshore that's heading this way, I'm going to go to the National Weather Service's website, or maybe the National Weather Service in Mobile, or I'll go to the National Hurricane Center. Credible sources, right, that are there to provide accurate information about whatever, in that case, where the hurricane is and how it's going to impact you and whatnot. I'm not going to go to Billy Bob's weather page. Okay. There's a lot of those out there, and the internet is a wonderful place. It allows people to express themselves. It's also a place of confusion, because some people who come across to be professionals or academics are really not. Give you an example. That whole hurricane example last year, as Hurricane Laura was moving into Louisiana, there was a 12-year-old boy who became fascinated with hurricanes, and last year set up a Facebook page and started reposting all this stuff that he was finding on Twitter and Facebook and some of these other places out there. And he had no idea what he was talking about. He had, and he was making all these fanciful claims that, oh no, that thing's not going into Louisiana, it's going into Mobile. And next thing you know, there was like 10,000, 20,000 people that was following his page. He claimed that he had a lifelong career in weather, all of 12 years, and that he was an expert. And about 20,000 people signed up and started following his page, and he had probably 70 to 80% of those people convinced that Hurricane Laura, that actually impacted Cameron, Louisiana, was going to shift abruptly and hit Mobile, Alabama. There was a lot of panic. So that's what I'm talking about. You want to be discriminating. I know that's not a popular word right now, but when it comes to academic research, you want to discriminate. You want to analyze. You want to make sure that whatever you're reading and processing is coming from a legitimate source, right? And that the information that's contained within that document can be verified for validity and integrity and accuracy. So how do you do that? Well, most academic sources tend to have references of their own, works cited pages of their own. If they're presenting their own evidence, it's usually coupled with outside opinions that are in a similar topic or similar field about which they're writing. And so they're going to have a lot of information on that back page in the bibliography section and the references or the works cited to allow you to find even more information. But that's pretty much a key indicator that if you're using their material as a source for your paper, that is pretty much a clear-cut sign that, hey, this has been academically verified and it's pretty credible. Versus, say, Billy Bob's webpage, he doesn't source anything, right? He's claiming that he's coming up with all this stuff himself, and stealing other people's information or stealing other people's images and reposting in a way that may be inaccurate and invalid and without a certain integrity. So now, having said that, what kind of academic, where can I find these academic sources? Well, I would say on the internet, a .com website 90% of the time is probably not going to work unless you go to a site that's like a news media site like CNN or Fox News or Drudge Report. I mean, hell, I don't even watch the news, so I don't know what all these new sources are. But you could go to a .com website that's run by a newspaper. Sometimes you have academic magazines that have .org or .com websites that allow you to peruse and read some articles for free that are published in a peer-reviewed magazine. Those are perfectly fine. But or a government website, although we tend not to trust half of what the government tells us. That's just a joke. But usually what you see on a .gov website is automatically given academic credibility, and you can pretty much validate the integrity and the accuracy of the information that's on those websites. So using the public internet is a good option. But here's what I prefer you do. The college here, Northwest Florida State College, has a wonderful library, and although people tend not to go to libraries anymore, they do have an online option. Okay, the problem is you can't ever find it, and that's the number one complaint I get from most of my students is, where in the hell is this link to the library that you keep telling us about? I can't find it on the homepage. Well, I'll be honest with you, it took me a while to find it too. So let me go up here. I want to show you here on the website. If you go to student resources, and then you're going to scroll down to campus resources, and then one more menu down, you're going to scroll down to the Susan Myers Learning Resources Center. Now, back in my day, they called that a library. Now they call it a Learning Resources Center, mainly because they offer more services than just, being able to check out books and read old news articles and stuff like that. They have tutoring sessions and academic advising and all that. So the Learning Resources Center here at Northwest Florida State, this is how you find that link. So once you click it, it's going to take you to the library's website. Let me do one thing here real quick because I want to make sure that I have access to my, let's see, there it is. Okay. So once you go to the library website, what you're going to do is you're going to scroll down here under, it says student assistance. Right here, I'm going to highlight it for you, student assistance. And you're going to click this second link here, okay? And the second link is the articles and streaming videos. These are the databases, okay? It says search for news, journal articles, reports, ebooks, etc. Okay? This is where you're going to use, this is the link you're going to use to perform most of your research, not only for this class, but for other classes as well. So if you go on into nursing or computers or science or whatever, you're going to have to perform some level of research in order to get your bachelor's degree, definitely your master's degree and PhD. So right now, this is a good time to learn how to use these resources that are available. So let me go ahead and do that. I'm going to click articles and streaming videos. Okay. Wow, this has changed since I last used it. Okay. Interesting. This is brand new for me too. I was expecting the login page. Well, let's learn it together. It looks like if I scroll back, yeah, as of July 13th, Learning Commons Services has updated to a new system. You no longer need your borrower ID and PIN to access databases and resources. If you're prompted to log in, use your Northwest Florida State email and password, the same as your Blackboard, college email, and RadarNet. That's great. That's awesome. Because they claimed here there was a one-stop single sign-on experience for the exception of the library databases. You had to have a separate PIN for that and your student number. So that's good. I like that. That means we're finally getting that true single sign-on experience that they were talking about. So, all right, let me go back here, articles and streaming videos. All right. So from here, here's what I advise you to do. Now you can start clicking each one of these links you see right here as a database. Now, most people, for those of you who've had 101, you probably remember Academic Search Complete or EBSCOhost, which is absolutely fine. But what I'm going to show you here can probably save you a lot of time in order to narrow down the type of search engine that you want to use to narrow down that topic even more. So here's what I want to propose. Yep. Have a question? No? Okay. So let's say hypothetically, I'm going to write a paper on my favorite Greek goddess. Okay. As you probably know, I'm a comparative mythologist by trade. I think I talked about that in the first class meeting. And the goddess Athena, the Greek goddess Athena, happens to be one of my favorite mythological characters for many reasons. So let's say that I want to do a little research on the Greek goddess Athena. Maybe I'm writing a paper about her ability to thwart the god of war, Ares, at just about every turn, in which she was, we have a lot of stories that show that she was a hell of a lot smarter than Ares. And that was one of the reasons why he hated her so much, because she was absolutely a genius. Even though he was the offensive god of war, he could never best her in battle because she was so much smarter than he was. So let's say, for example, I want to do a little research about Athena. So of course, that's a literary subject, right? So here's what I want you to do. Instead of just typing in Athena in one of these databases, what I suggest you do is come up here to this first search box where it says all subjects. Let's narrow it down, because you never know, you may come across some other reference to Athena that has absolutely nothing to do with literature. Maybe there's a computer system named Athena, or some company in business named Athena. You know, for what, a million different possibilities out there. So this right here, this will help you narrow down the specific subject, the context that you want to search on that key term. So I'm going to scroll down here, and we're going to, where's my arts and sciences? English, humanities, and language. Here we go. Let's try this one. And so when you do that, you're going to narrow down the databases. So as you see, as I switched over to the English, humanities, and languages, that narrowed down the list to 18 different databases. Okay. So want to go through here, and you, like I said, you can pick any one of these databases that you want, but just know that once you click that subject matter, that you really scaled down the number of databases that it could be using, and kind of narrow that topic down to a specific subject. Okay, so I'm going to use the Project Muse here. I've used it before. It's actually a pretty good database. Artemis is also another good one. I don't see it listed here for some reason, but I could probably search on that up here in the top and find it. But let's just, for the sake of example, we're going to use Project Muse. So I'm going to click that and that will load up. Hopefully. Yep, here we go. So there's the new sign-on experience right there. I'm going to click my name since I've already signed in. Apologize for the text message here. My wife is at a birthday party with my son, sending me all kinds of pictures and videos. All right, so here we go. We're at the Project Muse. Ah, there is Athena's owl right there. Beautiful. See, we're at the right spot. All right, so Project Muse, like I said, a search engine. I'm going to accept this to get this banner out of the way. Well, it's not working, so let's, looks like the page is not responding. There we go. All right, it's responding now. That's good. All right, so general keyword search here. This is the database I want to use. I want to look up information about the Greek goddess Athena. All right, move this out of the way. So there we go. All right. So I typed in my keyword, just like Google. This works just like Google, but there's some things we can do here to narrow it down and make it even more relevant for us. Okay. So I want to, let's say that you only want to find books or articles. You can click on those text boxes there, just like in Amazon or some other website that has some kind of web cart. You can narrow down the search results even more just by clicking the check boxes here. I don't see. Okay, it is still timing out on me. I don't know what's going on here. It is really slow. So this must be that new system they were talking about. All right, so here's one way that you can find some articles for your paper. All right, so as you see over here, I've clicked journal articles. These are more likely than not peer-reviewed articles that have a particular relevance to the key term that I just searched for, which is the goddess Athena. Let me silence this. This is driving me crazy. There we go. So I'm going to start off with this first, this second link right here. Actually, therapy with saffron and the goddess Athena. No, I don't want that one. That's probably not what I'm looking for. Sacred Greek history. Let's say I want to look through this one right here. This is American Journal of Philology, which is probably fascinating. All right, so I'm perusing this article. As you can see, it gives me the full text of the article that I might want to use for my paper. So I'm looking through the abstract. I can see that it, let's say, for example, it does have relevance to something I want to write about. So yeah, I want to use this. So I'm going to click the download button. Of course, you want to make sure that if there's a full text option available in that search engine, use it. Definitely use it, because if not, you're going to get thousands and thousands of links show up, and they're probably going to be just abstracts. They're not going to have a lot of information in there at all that has any relevance to do with your paper. So in this case, as you can see, I've downloaded this article. Yeah, this is exactly what I want to use for source material in my paper. The other thing that I advise you to do for your papers is, if you want to, go ahead and, as you're performing your research, most of these search engines will give you an option to view the citation. And this is extremely helpful to you. It's going to save you a lot of time, if you don't do this, then you're going to have to go back and look it up in your MLA guide or your textbook to try to figure out how to write this citation. So, of course, you know, the paper that we're writing here is an MLA style paper. I've got the source material that I want to use. I'm just going to go ahead and copy this citation and paste it into my Word document. And you don't have to worry about formatting it at all. It's already done for you. So as you're doing your research, make sure you, one, use an official library database, okay? Make sure you have a good idea of the topic and narrow that down as much as you can. The keyword search, the more you narrow it down and make it more specific, the more likely you are to find the search results that you're looking for, whether it be a book, a news article, a journal article, etc., whatever it is. Also, make sure that a full text option is available. And once you do that, that filters out a bunch of stuff that is not relevant. And then you can start downloading these PDFs and looking through them and seeing exactly what you can use. Even if you just use one little blurb or one sentence or two sentences, hey, that's critical information that you can use to back up some of the arguments that you're making in your paper. So you definitely want to take note of that and make sure that you download that document, and more importantly, go ahead and copy and paste that reference. Look, for every one that you download, if you just go ahead and copy and paste it onto the document and you decide later, oh, there's not a lot in there that I even want to use anyway, hey, all you have to do is go back and delete it. You can delete that reference from your works cited page. So it's much easier to delete entries that you find that you do not need versus to add entries that you forgot to copy the citation. So like I said, this will save you a lot of time if you just copy that, go ahead and put it in the works cited page. And then as you're doing your synthesization, you can go back and analyze whether or not you even need that. All right. So that's one option. Let me give you another option here. This, again, I understand a lot of people love Google. I love Google. I think Google offers a wonderful service, but let me show you what can happen if you don't take the proper steps to set this up. Okay. So I'm going to Greek goddess Athena. All right. So as soon as I do that, look what happens. Oh boy, I get all kinds, boyfriend, parent, mother, sister, all kinds of stuff. Photos and video, which are cool. Then you start getting all these little questions. Then look, lo and behold, look who shows up. Wikipedia. Wikipedia, Spark Notes, Lit Charts. What are some of the other ones out there? Anyway, all of this source material, or this secondary source material that claims to be an expert on any kind of literary source, you don't want to use those as sources for your paper. Why? Because there's no way to accurately verify the integrity of the information that's included in that source. Wikipedia is one of them, okay? As I show in my 101 class, I show a video of Michael Scott from The Office talking about Wikipedia. He thinks Wikipedia is the best thing ever because anyone in the world, anywhere, can write about anything they want about any subject. And as he says, you get the latest accurate information, which we all know is bollocks. So that's why we don't use Wikipedia, because they have there's no overarching committee that is there to make sure that the information that is included in that article is accurate and up to date. Although there may be references down at the bottom of that Wikipedia article, anyone in the world can go in there and just start changing and manipulating stuff. So that's why Wikipedia is not a good site to cite from. Is it a good place to find other primary sources? Absolutely. But you do not want to cite or source anything from a Wikipedia article. Okay. So how do I use Google effectively and at the same time get rid of Billy Bob's goddess page or whatnot. Well, here's what we can do. We can throw in what's called a selector. Google offers these things called selectors that allows you to change the way that search is performed. So if after my keyword search up here, which is Greek goddess Athena, I can narrow down the type of sites that I want it to search in. So using the first selector, which is site:.edu, what that's going to do, watch what happens to this page as soon as I do that. Whoa. All right. So as you notice, it starts to clean up the search results here. Yeah, I still have these images, but these images are coming from .edu sites. So that's okay. That's cool. I like that. So as you can see, the first article here, Athena, goddess of wisdom, from the Perseus Digital Library at a .edu website. That's credible. The goddess Athena, the goddess of wisdom from Cornell College. Damn right, that is definitely credible. Okay. So here's a great way to narrow down or filter out all of the garbage that you don't want and ensure that you're getting some academic integrity in your search result. The other thing you can do too, which is kind of simulates a feature that you have on the library databases, is you can change the file type that it returns. Okay. Most of the time, what you want as a researcher, as a student, is you want the ability to download a PDF and start highlighting information in that article that you can paraphrase and put into your paper. Okay. You want that in a PDF. So most of the academic articles that you will find hosted on an academic website will be in a PDF format. 9 times out of 10. I won't say all of them, but most of the time you should be able to find them in a PDF format. So how do I narrow that down? Well, you come in here and add another selector, file type, colon, and then just PDF. No dot, just colon PDF. And so what Google will do then is search that key term on a .edu website and return you a PDF. Okay. So as you can see here, whoa, look at there, the wisdom of Athena from Kennesaw.edu. So if I click that, chances are, look at there, there's a journal article right there, right off of Google. You don't have to log into a library database. You can get it right there from Google. Okay. Same thing here, Goddess Athena. Another PDF. More information that I could use in my paper. Now that looks a little bollocks. So it is on a yeah. So this is a book that someone scanned and uploaded probably to their student account. So yeah, you're gonna have to discriminate even on that side too. That's okay. But as you can see, it really does narrow down. It really narrows down and saves you a lot of time. Okay. And again, these are papers that you can use and source inside of your paper as well. Okay. So there you go. A little bit, I think I went over a few minutes, sorry. But there's a little demonstration on the research methods technique that I would like for everybody to use. Now, you know, you're totally up to you which one you want to use. If you want to use the library databases, I prefer the library databases because I know how to use them and I know how to get the search results I'm looking for. But it does come with a learning curve. If that's not the right option for you, well, then you also have the Google option as well. Okay. Do I have any questions about that from the students that are out there tonight? Was that helpful?
Yep, it was.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. I'm going to take about 5 minutes here. I'm going to pause my recording. Okay. Resume the recording here. So Let's talk about some of the required readings that we had over the last week and then this week as well. I'm going to start off with the fiction section because, again, I wasn't here last week. I apologize for that. But just to give you a little bit of perspective on the fictional readings, for last week, we read and analyzed Nathaniel Hawthorne's The Birthmark, Toni Morrison, Recitative, and Ray Bradbury's The Veldt. And one second. All right, cool. So I had a message in the chat. I just want to make sure I acknowledge that. So I would always get this question from students. Professor Davis, do you love these stories that are assigned in 102? Love is a strong word. Being a comparative mythologist, someone who is fascinated by ancient and medieval culture, I will say that I like these readings. I respect these readings. I respect the people that wrote them, but they are not necessarily my favorite. But if you analyze them in the historical context in which they were written, I think you can find some benefit, okay? Because they do offer a perspective. And remember, from the very first class meeting, we talked briefly about Plato's theory of the allegory of the cave, and how all of life is about perspective and the perception that you have of what is real versus what your reality, a relative reality, in what way does that differ from the absolute reality? And that's what these readings offer, is a perspective on the reality of the situations of the culture in which they were written. So let's start off with Nathaniel Hawthorne. And again, I'm not going to deep dive into this. Again, I'm going to come at this from a historical context, but we will talk about some of the things that and relate them back to the readings here and there. So I want to start off with Nathaniel Hawthorne. For those of you probably already know, prominent writer from the Northeast in the 19th century. A very unique character at that, in the fact that his ancestors were some of the pilgrims that came over on the Mayflower, and some of his ancestors were actually involved personally with the Salem witch trials. Now, if you know anything about that culture, it was a very strict religious-based culture that had a strict interpretation of the Bible, and particularly the King James Version of the Bible, and formulated their culture in a way that adhered to those strict tenets. And in many ways, they were very oppressive early on for people who did not have those same shared values. And anyone that was seen within that society that lived differently or thought differently was ostracized. And as we know, in the Salem witch trials, many people, especially women, were falsely accused of witchcraft, being in league with the devil, and underwent absolute horrific torture and executions in order to control that subculture during that time. So, Nathaniel Hawthorne, being very much an academic, did a lot of research into his family's history, and was very ashamed, extremely ashamed, to learn that his family was personally involved in those events, those tragic events during the Salem witch trials, to the point where he actually changed the spelling of his last name in order to kind of distance himself from any association with what his ancestors did. But at the same time, being a writer in the 19th century, he used that as also an opportunity to kind of give a perspective of how did that mindset trickle down into his current culture and his contemporary culture. Some of those attitudes and some of those beliefs trickled down. So you have somewhat of a religious perspective to this work, but you also have another one that anyone in the 19th century was fully aware of, and that was a rapid change in the type of culture and specifically economic culture that the United States and the UK was going through during this time. We were moving from an agricultural society from the rural areas, provincial areas of both of those countries, and people started migrating into the cities and being part of the industrialization that was taking place during the 18th century. At the same time, you had a lot of not only advances in technology, but also in scientific thought as well. And one of the things that I think kind of impacted a lot of writers during this time period, even Nathaniel Hawthorne, was the theory of evolution. And Charles Darwin's theory of evolution, and that was a scientific theory that not since the Renaissance times really challenged the worldview that was dictated by the church. And Nathaniel Hawthorne, in a way, kind of piggybacked off of that. Not necessarily saying he was fully embracing that movement, but he was fascinated by that movement in the way that the perspectives changed rapidly during the 19th century, moving people out of the rural areas into the cities, away from religion and a little more into science, being more of an agnostic kind of culture. And he was fascinated by that. And the birthmark, I think, in many ways is kind of an analysis of that change. And so you got a couple of characters there. Again, we want to use characters, plot, themes when we're analyzing these works. So again, the two characters that we really want to focus on here, Elmer, who is kind of the protagonist of the story. The story is really revolving around him and his pursuit, his quest. And Georgiana, who is somewhat of an antagonist, although the birthmark on her cheek really serves as being more of the antagonist. So we'll call it Georgiana, but it's that perception, right, that Elmer has of that birthmark that's really antagonizing him and is really driving this quest that he's on. And so, again, consistent with the theme of the change that's going on in the 19th century, you've got a character here, Elmer, who is a scientist, someone who is he's a learned man, he's a fluent man, but someone who has an ego problem to the point to where he believes that it is his sole purpose to change the world, right? And he's buying into this shift away from the religious and spiritual and agricultural legacy of the past and fully embracing the more modern urbanization, industrialization, and scientific movement that's going on here. And so he's fully bought into this. And it kind of drives his ego to the point where he starts to believe that he is truly outside of nature. He is above nature, and he has the power to manipulate, shape, and mold and change nature into what he wants it to be. And you see this early on in the interactions that he has with Georgiana. Georgiana, who is this passive, young, beautiful woman. One of the questions that always pops up into my mind and several other students' mind when we talk about this work is, she seems like a wonderful girl. How in the hell did she end up with him? Well, good question. That's a very good question, but the fact of the matter, we can't answer that, but we just know the fact that She had a lot of young men who were enamored by her or enamored with her. And they absolutely thought she walked on water. She was like this goddess Aphrodite that was just walking through and gliding upon the ground, and she was absolutely perfect. Um, and if you look into the text, there's even this indication that there's this tension immediately between Elmer and Almer, I'm sorry, or and Georgiana, because they are the moment that we're in this story, we see them together, but we kind of get a little bit of the backstory too, right? Elmer is looking at her and and accepts the fact that, hey, something is not right here. Nature screwed up with her. As beautiful as she is, she's not perfect. Why? Because she has this blemish, this birthmark on her cheek that absolutely drives me crazy. And even confronts Georgiana about it, to the point to where she retorts and she's like, well, none of the other guys who sought my hand had a problem with it. In fact, one of the guys said that it was like a fairy had kissed me on the cheek. Why do you have a problem with this birthmark? And so again, we have this situation where Georgiana represents nature. We all know that in the Platonic view of the world, according to Plato, everything that exists in the physical realm is imperfect. And it's an exact copy of something that is perfect in the realm of ideas, right? According to Plato, that was his worldview. So that's what Nathaniel Hawthorne is playing with here. He's playing with, how does that worldview, that Platonic classic Greek worldview, still apply to a modern world? And that's what Elmer is challenging, right? And he's going to, feels that he has a right to challenge that, because he has now bought into this modernist movement. We're moving away from religion, we're moving away from nature and away from agriculture, and we're fully embracing industrialization and modernization and science and technology. That is where my hope lies in. And so he cannot accept the natural beauty that is inherent within Georgiana, and he is going to be on a quest to change it, to perfect it. Now, as we all know, the road to hell is paved with perfect intentions. We've all heard this saying, and I'm not saying that Elmer is totally a bad guy and totally an ass for. I think he meant well, but the loss, again, how do I want to rephrase this? I don't want to say it's a loss. The rejection of nature and what it meant to be human. Elmer thought that he was above that he had somehow reached this pedestal where those rules no longer applied to him. In that way, he lost empathy. He lost connectivity to even the thing that he held most dear, this beautiful young woman by the name of Georgiana. So in a way, Hawthorne is using this to kind of comment on the changing perspectives that are going on in the 19th century. But at the same time, you can apply this back to what transpired during the times of his ancestors in the Salem witch trials. Many of those people were accused of heinous crimes and being in the league with the devil and consorting with the devil, mainly because they looked differently, they talked differently. In other words, they rejected the total customs of the day and tried to be individuals. And so in some ways, this story is kind of a reflection and an analysis on where he thinks that the culture started in the Massachusetts community and where it ended up in the 19th century. Um, Now, there's some other references that we can draw upon here as well, because as we all know, reading the story, that Elmer and Georgiana do this back and forth kind of thing to the point to where he is focused, resolute that he's going to change and manipulate nature. He's going to remove this blemish, this imperfection from her cheek. And she finally gives in and says, okay, my love, whatever will make you happy, we will do it. And as you can see in the story, that after several failed experiments, you would think that he would get to a point where he could empathize with Georgiana and understand the consequences and the impacts that this experimentation was having on her, having on their relationship. But no, almost narcissistic, I guess you could say, or sociopathic in his quest. He was not going to allow anything to deter him, not even the impacts and the consequences that was happening with Georgiana, to the point to where we get to the end of the story where he tries the final experiment. And it indeed removes the birthmark, but in the process kills the very thing that he claimed to love. He achieved his goal, which was perfection. But look what it cost him: death, the death of that which he loved. And I don't know if you noticed at the end, his reaction, even after it was almost like, oh, it was almost like, I recognize, oh, she's gone. This is what I did wrong. I'm going to try differently next time. I want to perfect this. It was absolutely crazy. But again, we're talking about this lack of empathy, this lack of connectivity, this sociopathic mind that is driven in a way that he wants to find a way that he's going to conquer nature. He's going to overcome nature. Now, one thing that you could probably allude to, a similarity here, would be Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. And if you had that kind of feeling when you were reading the short story, you're spot on, because Nathaniel Hawthorne actually happened to be friends with the Shelleys, Percy Shelley and Mary Shelley. Mary Shelley happened to be the author of Frankenstein, which has a similar theme, this Gothic theme of this scientist who refuses to accept that nature has taken that which that he loved more than anything in his life, and he's going to use science, the power of science, to bring that back. And he's going to experiment and test the process in order to do that, and create in the process he created this monster. So he achieved partially what he wanted, he set out to do, but at the same time, look at the ramifications, look at the consequences. And I think that's what Hawthorne was commenting on here, and that our pursuit to make the world be what we want it to be comes with consequences. Force people to be as we want them to be comes with consequences. And I think you see those consequences that are coming to the forefront. His commentary on that, not only as it applied to the time in which he was living, but he's also throwing a little bit of shade back to his ancestors as well, because that's exactly what they were doing. And, this being able to break out of that cycle, I think that was one of the main things that he wanted to talk about. So again, a little bit of a historical context there, of why Nathaniel Hawthorne shaped these characters in the way he did. To me, the historical context makes a lot of sense. It's a school of thought that we use to go back and do a little research. And when we're analyzing a story, we want to analyze the story relative to the culture, the time period, the religious, the political, the social, the economic, all of those aspects of culture as it relates to the author who composed the work. Because all of those things that are happening in that author's contemporary time has an influence on the writing. So the historical context, I think, works very well in this case to kind of do a little bit of an analysis as to why the author wrote the characters in this way and allow them to carry out certain actions and some of the themes that go along with that. Okay. All right. So that's story number one. Let's move on to story number two. Recitative by Toni Morrison. Now, this this is one that I enjoy discussing in the classroom with a diverse group of people, preferably a full class, 20, 25, 30 people. I love it. I always love the discussions that come about when we sit down and analyze recitative. But sadly, in this case, this is being delivered one to many in a lecture form that's online. So unfortunately, you're going to kind of miss out on that discussion. So I do encourage you to use the discussion boards if you want to kind of mimic that discourse that would take place in a classroom. This is a good piece to do that. But Toni Morrison was a wonderful, wonderful writer. Unfortunately, she passed away a couple of years ago, but she was a professor, a writer, and a civil rights leader, although technically most civil rights leaders today do not consider Toni Morrison to be a civil rights leader. She, along with Langston Hughes, was some of the first people to bring some of these topics to the forefront. And the way that Toni Morrison did it, I absolutely love it. Of course, we understand America's dark time in the 19th and the 20th century with the treatment of African Americans in this country and how that has brought about some of the issues that we have today. Toni Morrison was one of those authors who wanted to take more of a, it's probably apparent, she wanted to be take more of a neutral approach, not a political approach, but one that was more middle of the road, that allowed everyone to sit back and analyze their perspectives on life and on people. And I think that's one of the reasons why she wrote this. So we have a couple of characters here, Roberta and Twyla, in this kind of pulp fiction, kind of like linear or non-linear format. Most short stories you get that start to have that starting point from point A to point B, and you have this consistent timeline that runs between the two. In this story, Recitative, we have slices of time. We have the two characters who are interacting with one another, but we're only getting slices of time. So we see them as young girls, we see them as teenage girls, then young women, then married women, then later in life, but we don't really see the progression of the characters along the way. But what we do see is that we have a couple of characters here that have similar backgrounds, similar economic backgrounds, have similar family backgrounds. Both of them come from broken homes whose mothers are in the picture, but they're not active in the care, giving of and raising of the children, hence the reason why they start off in an orphanage. But the thing that does separate them is that Miss Morrison gave us a nugget that the two did not have the same ethnic backgrounds. Now, the question that I always get when we sit down and we study these works is, well, I can't figure out what Roberta's race is or Twyla's race. I think this, but I may be wrong. It's kind of vague. I'm having a hard time with that. what did Miss Morrison intend for the race of those two characters? And I'm going to give you the same reaction that she gave. Whenever she gave interviews about it, she just laughed. The fact that you focus on race and trying to identify the race or the races of the two characters is an aspect of a conditioning that has taken place since the beginning of time within human culture. We are, if not personally or actively conditioned, we are subtly and passively conditioned by the overall culture to see the world in a way that's consistent with the people around us. And again, this goes back to Plato with that allegory of the cave, the perspectives, the perceptions of the images on the wall. We don't see what's on the wall for what it really is. We can only see what's on the wall, what we think is there. And what we think is there is always based on our own experiences and biases and prejudices and other discriminating factors, which at the same time are wrong, but they are, as Miss Morrison said, come naturally to human culture. So one of the things that I love about this story is that it's not a black and white kind of story, no pun intended. As Miss Morrison said, this is a story that allows you to follow the lives of two young women who come from two different social backgrounds and ethnic backgrounds, and the progression of the relationship between the two, and how even as young girls, the perspectives were altered and shaped by their environments. But if you notice, as children, they were able to kind of look past that quicker, right? Or get past those issues or differences quicker and easier. But as the women grew over time, life experience, adulting, as they say, kind of shapes and molds us, and we kind of, some of those attitudes and beliefs and thoughts become reinforced by the experiences that we have. And those are the things that Miss Morrison really wanted to cause people to think about. Not so much in, well, black is black and white is white. I want you to think about it from a human aspect and how people are perceived to be expected, according to this perception, expected to act a certain way based on the perspective that you have. Case in point, here's a great example of it. In the scene where there's the picket line, we have a couple of thoughts here, specifically about the races of the characters and how, based on the interactions they had with that protest and that picket line. And that was the moment in the class where I said, okay, well, at this point, where do you think your thoughts lie on who's who here? And it, 9 times out of 10, most of the students say, well, I think Twyla is the white character and I think Roberta is the black character because of the attitudes about integration. Okay, well, yes, I do remember, I don't remember this, but I remember the story that my mom told me that there were, because she remembers when schools were integrated in the South, that there were a lot of white people that were very upset that African Americans were being integrated into schools. But at the same time, she has a lifelong friend who was one of the children that was integrated into the school that she went to. And they still talk about some of that stuff too, especially last year, they were talking about it a lot. And she said that she remembered that her parents were against her being integrated into that school too. So, and I remember reading an article on Miss Morrison's thought process during that scene, is that the perception was that all African Americans wanted to be integrated and all white Americans were dead set against it. When in fact, there were just as many African Americans during the time who were protesting integration at the same time that many white Americans were advocating for it. So, what does that say about race relations and the perceptions that are being manipulated and shoved onto people by the culture? Well, it goes back to Plato. According to Miss Morrison, it goes back to Plato in that you are conditioned, and that's where racism, the root of racism really lies, in the conditioning of expecting people to fit in a certain mold that you perceive that they should fit into, not seeing them for individuals. Not saying you need to be ignorant of someone's cultural background. That's not even what Miss Morrison was saying, but kind of living out that tenet that Dr. King wanted people to reshape their minds, in that one day he wanted his children to be judged on the content of their character, not by the color of their skin. In other words, not allow those perceptions of how you think they should act because they come from a certain cultural background, but judging them based on the actions that they're currently performing as an individual. And that gives someone validation as an individual when you are able to do that. Let me stop here real quick. What is your opinion on Maggie, particularly at the end when they say, "What in the hell happened to Maggie?" Do you think Maggie was representing something spectacular? I do think Maggie represented something spectacular, but for a different reason. Again, Miss Morrison is playing somewhat of a game here because she knows how things work. And let me throw this out there to you, because I'm 46 years old, and I can tell you the image, if I look at it in Platonic terms, the image that I see on the wall right now at 46 is not the same image that I saw on the wall at 30. It's definitely not the same image that I saw on the wall at 20. And I can't even, I'm so damn old now, I can't even remember what the image I saw on the wall was when I was like 5 or 6. And so I think what Maggie represents, and we can look this up. I do remember reading a little bit of Miss Morrison's thoughts on it. What Maggie represents is how that life perception changes over time. In other words, they believed one thing happened, right? Or convinced themselves one thing was true. And then later on, as time progressed, they start to doubt and question, well, was that really true? Did that really happen? And in this case, Roberta and Twyla, at one time kind of convinced themselves that, the other girls did something to Maggie. And now they're looking back on that same event years later, and Roberta was questioning, well, oh my God, wait a second. No, was it us? Right? Or something to that effect. I can't remember. But the point is that how perspectives change over time. And I think that, to me, that's more indicative of the overall effect that Miss Toni Morrison was trying to have with this wonderful piece called Recitative. Beautiful story, written by a beautiful woman. Like I said, she died a couple of years ago. She was such a treasure. Most people sadly do not remember her. They never even heard of her. And I think that's unfortunate, because her perspective on the world and on culture and on race relations in this country, the middle ground approach that she took most of the times, I think, is desperately needed. today, and in the fact that not everything is black and white, as most people try to make it out to be. So anyway, so that's recitative, Miss Morrison's recitative, a little bit of historical context and analysis on that piece. Now on to everyone's favorite, The Veldt by Ray Bradbury. I had a brain fart there for a second. Ray Bradbury's The Veldt. Now, you know, this most people have heard of Ray Bradbury, Fahrenheit 451. You've probably read his work. The Veldt is along similar lines. So let's get the historical context into play here. Ray Bradbury, a 20th century author, started out as a short story writer. He was one of those that was fascinated by early modernist writers like Jules Verne and H.G. Wells. Those are writers that are credited with creating some of the very first fiction, science fiction. Now, one of the things you got to remember is during this time period in the modernist movement, that's when a lot of the science and technology focused writing really started to take off, and many writers at the time were trying to shed the vestiges and traditions of the past, getting away from more religious topics, and moving them, you know, closer to these scientific explorations and stuff. At the same time, you had another author who was fascinated with this kind of fantasy, not so much in the science realm, but in the more naturalistic realm, and for different reasons. So this is the way I look at it. If you have H.G. Wells and Jules Verne and the other one, I can't remember the other author's name that's escaping me at this point. If you have them on this side of the spectrum that's really so focused on science and technology, on the other side, you've got people like J.R.R. Tolkien and C.S. Lewis, who were focused on maintaining cultural traditions and theological traditions of the past and making them applicable to a modern world of science and technology. So you had a vast spectrum here. Ray Bradbury was somewhere right in the middle, who was fascinated with both sides. And like I said, early on, he was very much a H.G. Wells and Jules Verne enthusiast, but as he got older, he became a little more, I won't say cynical or distrusting of technology, but he did want to put it in a real perspective. And The Veldt, I think, is a great short story in which to do that. Now, this story was written back in the 50s, I believe. And so we're talking about a futuristic setting here. Okay. So this author, specifically the setting and with the characters, where he's not writing about a culture that is, I guess, in a setting that's taken place within his own time period, but this is like 100 years in the future. What is human culture, specifically family interaction, going to be like 100 years from now, 200 years from now, when science and technology is integrated into it? So here's what we got. We've got this setting called The Veldt. It takes place in the future. We have a wonderful cast of characters here with George and Lydia. Yeah, and with their two children, Wendy and Peter. Set in the future, and lo and behold, it doesn't seem like the future to all of us. Why? Because it is set in their beautiful, happy home that is operated and maintained by some type of artificial intelligence. Yeah, maybe like a Siri or a Google or Amazon, Alexa, or something like that, right? Some type of artificial intelligence that has been added to the happy home, and a nice, beautiful upgrade that George and Lydia has provided for their family. And, you know, it just takes care of all their needs. It cooks the meals, it bathes the children, it clothes them, it entertains them, so that even Lydia, while George is gone and his working in his job, Lydia can sit back and relax and just kind of take care of the big picture stuff, and the house can end up doing all the little day-to-day stuff for her. Sounds like a wonderful setup, right? Well, yes and no. Because at the same time, although Ray Bradbury is writing about a setting that is in the future, he has to use cultural references that he knows that are applicable to his time period. Now, at the same time, he's trying to imagine what the family life is going to be like 100 years from now. But his only point of reference is what's going on in the 50s, right? So let's talk about how is it that George and Lydia and this interactivity with her children. Well, we're talking about, if you look at it in the instance of the 1950s, the family unit was kind of like Leave It to Beaver. So you got Ward Cleaver, who went to work 9 to 5 every day. He was a successful professional. He provided for his wife and his children. His wife stayed home. June, she stayed home. She was the caregiver. She was the homemaker. She took care of all the day-to-day stuff that was going on in the house. Of course, the two boys would go to school. They would come home. They'd get into mischief. And if it was dangerous enough mischief, and it was something that June didn't think that she could handle herself, then she would pass it off to her husband. Ward, I think you need to have a talk with the Beeve, or his I don't remember what his older brother's name was, but you need to have a talk with them. They've been doing bad things, right? So it was kind of a structured, modern, suburban life in the 1950s. Very structured, very suburban. And so you see some of those key cultural aspects even in the story of the Veldt. But the difference is that we have George, who is still in this 1950s mindset at the beginning of the story. Lydia, who really doesn't take care of the day-to-day stuff. The home takes care of the day-to-day stuff because it's smart enough to do that. It entertains the children. Well, she's got issues because, well, the home is entertaining the children in a way that she don't think is healthy. And so now we're creating this kind of clash between 1950s life and the futuristic life, because Lydia wants George to take charge and hey, you got to do something. You got to figure out what's going on here, because the children are watching violent stuff in the nursery, and the home is putting this on, and I just don't think it's healthy. Well, hey, guess what? Doesn't seem very futuristic at all, right? I mean, I can't tell you how many times I go, or before COVID hit, would go out to eat. And I was guilty of this too. How many children were there in the restaurant, sitting there with their iPads and watching God knows what, right? And that's just a part of it. It's just part of a new culture that is being driven by science and technology. But the issue here is that we've got a home that in some ways becomes a character itself, right? Because you have this instance where Lydia recognizes that some negative things are happening in the home. The children are distant from them. They don't really interact with them. She's worried that the technology is taking over too much. She's losing her connectivity with her children because the home has become the mother. And so she brings the attention to George that, hey, something needs to be done here. Well, what happens when something is given like that, a privilege is given like that, and then you try to take it away? Well, you're going to have some conflict there, right? Not only between Wendy and Peter and their parents, but also the home. The home, again, the home is going to be a character here that has some kind of influence or part to play. And so, again, for Ray Bradbury, looking at this situation in the future, trying to understand how and where American society and technology are going, why would he even sit around and do that? Well, you got to remember, this is coming out of the World War II. World War II was considered to be the modern war because of all of the use of technology, the advanced technology that was used in that war. And after the war ended, that technology that was developed, it was used not in a destructive way, but now was being used in a constructive way to make people's lives better. And so technology and culture were rapidly changing through the 1950s. And Ray Bradbury was a little, at first he was kind of buying into it, like, wow, this is nice. But at the same time, he's like, wait a second. If we, as he saw it, become more addicted to the benefits of technology, what effects does that have on human culture? Specifically in the micro setting, what effects can that happen or can that have on the family culture? And so I think that's one of the things that he's analyzing here in the Veld. And as you can see, as with the Veld itself, with the happy home, when George and Lydia try to regain the authority and regain the control that they've lost by allowing the science and technology to become the parent, so to speak, look what happened as a result. When they tried to reassert their authority, they threatened to unplug the home and take the kids out of the home and get back to nature. Some questions are thrown up here. I always get these questions from my class. So clearly something bad happens in the end. The parents are eliminated by the house or by the children. And I always get the question is, well, who ends up doing the parents in? Was it the children or was it the house? Well, yes, Wendy and Peter are kind of indicative of the Peter Pan generation, the kids who never wanted to grow up. But we're also talking about an artificial intelligence that is consistently not only executing a program to do an operation that's required to do, but at the same time, it's in the background trying to process and analyze and reason, well, what do they want next? What does this person tend to want more than other than this person? So it uses those algorithms to become smarter and kind of use that predictive technology to kind of anticipate what someone might want. And at the same time, this artificial intelligence is becoming so intelligent that it recognizes the fact that its whole existence, reason to exist, is being threatened by two parents who may not be necessary anymore, because the happy home is pretty much executing the jobs of the parents. So again, you're talking about a 1950s author who is sitting back and seeing rapid change, rapid growth, rapid industrialization and advancements in technology and the impacts that's having on the current culture in which he's living. And at the same time, he's thinking, wow, if we continue down this road, what type of family unit would we have 100 years from now, 200 years from now, even 50 years from now? Because let's be honest, the future that Ray Bradbury is describing here is already here, right? I don't know how many of you guys have smart technology in your home, but we have the ability when we come home every afternoon, the house or the devices in the house sense that we're here, and it can open up the garage for us. It can play music for us at a certain time. It can set the lights at a certain mood, depending on the time of day. Very similar to what you see here in the Velt. So I know a lot of students in the classroom setting, this happens to be their favorite story. They love to talk about the story because it's probably one that is most applicable to them right now, with all the stuff that's going on in technology. So, all right. And that does it for the fiction readings. Again, we're looking at different topics and themes that we can bring into the analysis. And that's usually how I conduct lectures on the readings. We don't necessarily do a book report type format here where we're analyzing. We're not analyzing the Stanford is already in there. We're not analyzing the works in like a book report from point A, chapter 1 to chapter 22. We're talking about high level topics and themes here. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to stop here for tonight. My voice is starting to go out. I'm talking a lot. What I want to do is, plus I don't want to make this video too long to where it can't process and upload to YouTube. So I'm going to take about an hour or so break. And then I'm going to record another video. I'll probably do it on my computer here. I probably won't do it on Zoom. That will talk about poetry section. So going over Shakespeare's sonnets, the sights and sounds poems, and also the internal and external. Now, honestly, I already have videos up there that are linked to the YouTube playlist about each one of those poems. And to be honest with you, I thought I did a pretty good job discussing those poems. So I'm kind of wondering whether this is even really needed. Well, I'll tell you what, I'll just add the people that did show up tonight, they'll be the ones that get to dictate and decide that for the rest of the class who were not able to show up tonight. So I've got 3 people in here tonight. Would you like to see me do another video on poetry? Or do you think the videos that are available linked on YouTube are sufficient enough?
I think it would be good if we could ask, if we could, I haven't really looked.
Okay. Who was that? Was that Mr. Stanford?
It was.
Okay, say that again. You kind of cut out there.
So I think I haven't looked at the YouTube or videos, but I think if you like posted a survey on the site asking any questions we have, you can make a video answering them.
Oh, I can do that too. That's a great idea. Okay. So I tell you what, that Mr. Sam, that's a great idea, actually. So here's what I would like for everybody to do. Watch the videos that I do have on YouTube for the poetry sections. You've only watched one of the videos so far, but it was helpful. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Watch the other ones too. And then I tell you what, I think Mr. Stanford had a great option there. So watch the videos. If you have questions, email them to me. Okay. Any questions that you have either about the poets or the readings themselves. And then I can use that feedback, those questions, to create a video in response to kind of custom tailor it for what you guys are needing. Thank you, Stanford, for giving me that recommendation. That's wonderful. Never even
No
thought
problem.
about that. Yeah, I'm not an online teacher, so I don't, this is all new to me. All right. So again, for those who are going to watch this after the fact, watch the videos that I have linked on YouTube for each of the poetry sections. Make a list of questions that you want answered about those poems and about the poets. Email them to me, and then I will upload a separate question and answer video probably this weekend. I'll probably do that on Sunday. Well, tell you what, I'll just analyze and look at it and see if I get a lot of questions over the next couple of days. I'll just go ahead and cut a video that answers those, upload it, and we'll just go from there. Okay. I won't try to dictate certain days that I'll do the video. I'll just, as I get questions, if I get enough of them, I'll just cut a video and throw it up there real quick and then link it on the YouTube site, or I mean the Blackboard site. Okay. All right. So like I said, I'm going to cut it here for now. We talked about some research methods, techniques, some recommendations on the library databases and on Google. And then we analyzed, according to the historical context, some of the highlights from the birthmark, recitative, and the Velt. And my voice is about to give out, so I'm going to cut the video here. Plus, I don't want to make it too long to where it can't process and upload to YouTube. So again, thanks to those who were able to join me tonight. Thank you for your questions. And as advised, watch the video on the poetry sections and then send me your questions. And if I get enough of those questions, I'll produce another video on demand and upload it to the site. That way we can get that out to the whole class. Okay.
All right.
As all, yep. Oops. Okay. And as always, if you are working through the content, working through your papers, if you come across, obstacles, if you've got questions, you need some guidance, you need some feedback, please email me. I'm here to help you. If you don't email me, I assume that everything is perfect in your world, that you're progressing through normally. Okay. So if you are encountering issues, if you're late on getting some of these things in, please email me. Let's talk about it and see what we can do to catch you up. Let's get your questions answered so that you can knock these assignments out and then move on to a fall without an English class. All right. So again, thank you to those students who logged on tonight. I appreciate it very much. And I will see you all next week.
Sounds good.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Have a good night.
You too.